So the next stop on our journey through the evolution of the drum set history, drum set playing, is the year 1941. Now, in our previous segment, we talked a lot about the big bands, swing drumming, we talked about Gene Krupa, we talked about what a drummer played, how the hi-hat was coming in, and this idea that jazz music was dance music. And that's why it was the most popular music in the country, because everyone could go out and dance to a big band. But as we move into the 1940s, a couple of different things start to happen. First of all, a lot of jazz musicians, particularly African-American jazz musicians, kind of are saying there's got to be more to life than just playing for dancers all the time. You know, it wasn't necessarily super satisfying for the musicians. They wanted to be able to play out and be more experimental and really take jazz forward. And if they were always having to play a very solid dance beat, that was kind of a tough deal. So a new style emerged in Harlem in the early 40s called bebop. Bebop was a style that was very much based on improvisation, and they would take an old standard and kind of rewrite the melody in a way that was much more complex. So how did the drummers fit into this bebop equation? Well, for one thing, you had drummers like Max Roach and Kenny Clarke, who were sort of two of the biggest names in early bebop drumming, and they both had been swing drummers, but you know, they were kind of sick of, again, sort of this big, huge bass drum. Remember, we still had large marching-sized bass drums at this time. And it was hard, you know, you just had this big booming sound underneath. So they said, well, let's get a real small bass drum happening. And at the same time, let's move away from boom, 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 this bass drum thing, and put our time, maybe even off the hi-hat, and put it up on a new kind of a cymbal. Remember, the original cymbals were Chinese or Turkish in origin, and they were quite small and just used for kind of little splashing and crashing. But now they said, well, what if we made a much larger cymbal and we kept time on that cymbal? And so suddenly, the whole feel moves away from this very bass drum heavy hi-hat kind of low, four on the floor, dunk, 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 dunk kind of thing, up to now this very light cymbal that just sort of floats on top of the time. This allowed drummers like Max Roach and Kenny Clarke to be more melodic. In other words, they could be listening to these new complex bebop melodies that were being played by the sax players or the guitar players or the piano players, and they could actually play those melodies themselves using the very small kick drums and the snare drum to actually play the melodic lines. So this is what the sound of bebop was, and as we move into the 40s and the 50s now, the idea of what jazz music is becomes more allied with bebop. And bebop moves away from being a dance music and really becomes its own art form. So the best way to explain how bebop works is to actually go back to the swing era and maybe show you how things worked then and then update them on a bebop type of a drum kit. So we're back here on our swing era kit. We still have our bigger bass drum, our smaller cymbals, and the way that bebop worked is it would often take a tune, a classic tune, and they would sort of rewrite the melody and make it more complex rhythmically, more complex melodically, and the drummers would play more of that melody instead of just playing the time. Let's take as an example Straight No Chaser, the Thelonious Monk song. You know, it's a very familiar melody that a lot of you probably know, and the melody goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba-doo-ba-doo-ba, ba-doo-ba-da-ba-dee-do, ba-da-ba-doo-da, ba-doo-ba-da-da, ba-doo-ba-da, ba-doo-ba-da-da-dee-do. Right? So if I was to play that in a swing style, it would kind of sound like this. 1, 2, 1. Okay, so still sticking with kind of a four on the floor feel underneath for the dance feel, and we're catching a little bit of the melody, but not so much. So now, voila, we've magically changed drum kits, and we have more of a bebop kind of a drum kit. Again, notice now we've gone down from a 22 to a 20-inch diameter. Our ride cymbals are bigger. This is a 20-inch ride and a 22. An 18-inch that could be used as a ride or a crash. And we got a tight, cranked up snare drum. So now I'm going to play the same straight no chaser melody for you, but in more of a bop scenario. So here we go on that. 1, 2, 2, 3. Who can tell me what made a drum set a drum set?
The low boy.
Kick pedal. Match grip.
The sock cymbal.
My name is Daniel Glass. I'm a drummer, author, and educator. In 1994, I joined a band called Royal Crown Revue. We were trying to figure out how to take the rebellious spirit of modern styles like punk and put it into big band and other roots music. We found out it was already there. I've been absorbed in this world ever since. I started researching the evolution of the drum set and the way that we play it. In the last dozen years, I've interviewed more than 60 different legendary drummers. I came to a startling conclusion. Perhaps more than any other instrument, the drum set is equipped to tell the story of America and American music. All of these immigrants coming from around the world brought their technology. Jazz music and pop music were one and the same. You could dance to it.